Good evening, my name is Cheyenne Schwien, and I'll be doing a presentation on the critical legal studies and the critical race theory. We will go ahead and switch over to the presentation here, and we'll start right here. So, this presentation is based on information found on critical legal studies and critical race theory chapters in a book by Gary Minda entitled Postmodern Legal Movements. Published by New York University Press in 1995, Minda addressed both theories in his book and pointed out that many scholars did not agree on exactly what critical legal studies meant, but that it did cause issues for people of color, in particular of the African American people, which has interest in critical race theory. Gary Minda is quoted as saying, "While law and economics attracted the attention of legal scholars, a distinct movement in legal studies established itself as a major critique of both traditional and law and economics scholarship. Critical legal studies is characterized as a negative or destructive movement, one that criticizes without offering either a constructive program or specific standard of reference for judging." End quote. Critical legal studies, otherwise known as CLS, came about in 1976. It was founded by a group of legal scholars who got together at the University of Wisconsin Law School. In this meeting, they came up with a new professional and social network they called the Conference on Critical Legal Studies. According to Henry Louis Gates, Jr., critical race theory, quote, challenges ahistoricism and insists on a contextual/historical analysis of the law, end quote. He further says it is not a bad theory, and it indicates that we take into consideration the things that theorists do not take into consideration in cases. Things such as the outcomes of different treatments of hate speech law. As the 1980s came to a close, a new movement in legal thought came about. It offered a new epistemological source for law that came from the real experience, history, culture, and intellectual tradition of people of color. This happened at the same time racial minority scholars within critical legal studies and other liberal networks established what was termed, quote, an African American movement, end quote, in legal studies to approach problems of race from the unique perspective of African Americans. According to Minda, CLS seeks to explore the way legal doctrine, legal education, and the methods of legal establishments work to bolster and sustain a universal methodology of oppressive, quote, inegalitarian relations, end quote. CLS scholars vary widely in opinion according to Minda, and goes back to using common sense of political analysis crucial to show the ways in which the chief state of legal scholarship and indisciplinary practice of liberal legal common sense justified a logical lawful language that paid no attention to the politics. Minda says that it seeks to do is based on Minda says what it seeks to do is based on, number one, the critical scholar seeks to demonstrate, quote, the indeterminacy of legal doctrine. Any given set of legal principles can be used to yield competing or contradictory results, end quote. Number two, The critical scholar participates in past socioeconomic research to show how certain things of interest groups and social classes, as well as economic institutions, gain from the use of legal decisions regardless of, quote, the indeterminacy of the legal doctrines, end quote. Number 3, the critical scholar attempts to show how legal investigation and culture puzzles those outside of scholarship and, quote, legitimates its results, end quote. And finally, number 4, by making the critical school part of legal debate, it could explain new or previously unliked visions of society and claim their understanding in lawful or governmental practice. According to Minda, CLS experts studied law as a political ideology, which was used as a means of reproducing and legitimizing the American society by agreement with the governmental viewpoint of liberalism, while critical race theorists put emphasis on racial awareness as a way to address the question of color in American law. The outdated view of how law of discrimination is seen was built by a silent category that shows a difference between people of diverse color and African Americans in general. The color white is what has been used to determine if goals have been met in terms of legal equality, which must show people of color having the same rights and progression as the central group. According to Minda, quote, critical race theorists argue that this way of thinking has the ideological consequence of convincing minorities that racial discrimination can only be eradicated through the implementation of critical race theory. Colorblind meritocratic standards which accord whites and blacks the same formal rights and processes, end quote. Critical race theorists claim when color is used in this matter, it makes people with racist attitudes prevail over society and seek to, quote, justify the oppression of racial minorities, end quote. This bolsters the stereotypes of marginal parties that have traditionally subordinated all people of color. Marginal party subordination can be seen on college campuses as reported by Charles R. Lawrence III in If He Hollers, Let Him Go, Regulating Racist Speech on Campuses, a publication in Duke University School of Law, in which he writes about panel discussions, conversations, and debates that he had recorded, or paraphrased the remarks made about racist incidents at various well-known universities. These universities excused the actions of students that committed various acts of racism against other students and faculty. That was excused by the universities using freedom of speech as a means of bolstering this behavior. The laws were so generalized that it overpowered the knowledge about different cultural attitudes and experiences of ethnic groups. Therefore, race awareness is the vital way that the scholars moved forward in their fight to achieve racial equality in the law, and this has yet to be achieved correctly. Minda concludes that the skin pigmentation of people of color is seen by critical race scholars as, quote, a symbol of cultural and personal identity constructed by white society. The fact that the literature on critical legal studies shaped the intellectual agenda for legal theory throughout the 1980s is evidence of the continuing appeal of CLS. Many legal scholars regarded CLS as offering valuable insights about the critical legal studies, nature of law, and adjudication. End quote. The influences of CLS is continued in legal scholarship, and the importance of critical race theory's development is key to changing the CLS critique, which remains, to this day, unresolved. So therefore, they have not accomplished what they have set out to do, which was racial equality for all. All of the law reviews are where the work of the realists is found, and it is within these reviews where the success of critical race theory will move forward through continued work by each generation until it is correct, and people of all colors are not only seen as equal but treated in the same manner as every color and race. So that was my presentation on the critical race theory and critical legal studies. Thank you. And that will be that will be it for me. Thanks.